oh, I yearn for the old days. They're gone, aren't they?
Yeah, they are gone, for sure. And I think last night was a display of that. I mean, the fact that you have a Republican presidential debate without the front runner, I think Politico did a good job this morning saying this wasn't a split screen, this was a sideshow. And I'm talking about Governor Haley
Right.
and
Well,
Governor
let's go to the
DeSantis.
main show, which is the president. We spent the last hour more on the side show with John Lieber of Eurasia Group. How did President Trump do last night?
Well, look, Iowa voters like him. Obviously, he's dominating in the polls, and you saw his ability to just talk about what he wants. You know, he's asked about the $8 trillion he added to the deficit, and instead he goes off on tangents about how Bidenomics isn't working and how he is going to be the one that can make sure he releases America's energy independence. By the way, no one, I think has told the former president that the United States is at record production, more than 13 million barrels a day. He said he would be able to do that. It's already happening.
It's beautiful. He knows that. Democrats won't correct him. Why? They don't want to talk about it either.
They don't want to talk about the fossil fuels that they're putting out into the world. They want to talk about the electrification of the grid that they're trying to make happen. But Donald Trump has a commanding lead in Iowa. What I think is more interesting, because I'm not sure if you guys talked about it yet, was that Chris Christie, though, yesterday suspended his campaign. Obviously, it was a long shot for him to ever become president. But New Hampshire becomes much more interesting now. There was a recent University of New Hampshire CNN poll which clearly shows 2/3 of his voters will go to Governor Haley or Ambassador Haley if he was to drop out. And he had this hot mic moment, which isn't boding well for anyone, even though people I'm talking to saying, well, he's just saying the quiet part out loud. Although a hot mic, he never meant to say this. I'm not sure if you caught what he said. But he basically says, you know, she's going to get destroyed.
Smoked. We talked about in the last hour that Ron DeSantis was somehow scared about what's to come. I think we're all assuming it's going to be Biden versus Trump. So let's talk about Biden versus Trump. That may well change, but that's the working assumption now. The president is trying to make this a choice between the former president, Donald Trump, and democracy. How successful is that going to be?
Well, it does come up in polls that people care about democracy. But at the same time, what comes up in polls time and time again is the economy. And that is why Trump continuously pivots to what he would do on the economy. He wants to make the Trump-era tax cuts in perpetuity. In perpetual, he wants them to be in law forever. So the economy is going to rank number one. Many people feel like they were doing better. But again, the timeline potentially is on Joe Biden's side. Inflation is coming down. All of your guests are talking about rate cuts. Potentially, people will go to the polls in November feeling better about where they stand economically and want to avoid the chaos that they felt under the Trump administration.
I can't believe we're going to have an economic domestic debate in October into the election, given the polarity on the culture wars around abortion and the border issues that both parties face. I just don't buy it's about the economy stupid. Am I wrong?
Well, the Biden campaign is going to campaign heavily on abortion. And Trump last night gave them a soundbite that they could easily put to swing states that's going to make suburban women really want to go out to the polls and vote for Biden. And that was when Trump said, for years, more than 50 years, we've been trying to get rid of Roe v. Wade. I was the one that was able to do it. I got rid of Roe v. Wade. But Trump is trying to have his cake and eat it too when it comes to abortion. A voter said she's going out to the polls to vote, go out to the caucus to vote on this. She's leaning towards Trump, but she said, I'm a bit confused, Mr. President, about where you stand on abortion. Because Trump has also tried to distance himself from states that want 6 weeks bans. He said, some women last night, he said this, don't know at 6 weeks if they're even pregnant. And he said, while I want to make sure that we can be a pro-life party, he says we also need to win elections. So he's walking a very fine line on this, but the Biden camp is certainly going to hit him on this.
And on immigration, how's that? I mean, basically, a large part of the country is saying rebuild Trump's walls that everybody was, as a generalization, huge part of the nation was appalled about, and that's shifted, right?
Well, Trump is still saying he wants to build the wall, but this is something actually Ron DeSantis and others has hit him on. He came out and said, I'm going to build a wall, and then never did it.
But now things have changed, is how I...
Well, now things have changed in the sense that potentially we might get an immigration border package before the election. And actually, even though Biden has to deal with the progressives on this who really don't want to see any changes when it comes to parole or amnesty, a border package under Biden can actually help him going into November.
John Lieber of Eurasia was talking with us on the last hour about the rest of the world watching, the consequences of this election. let's just talk about what's happening in the Red Sea at the moment. Norman Rawls joining us later on the program, a good friend of yours, I know. Houthi rebels launching a really complex attack in the last day or so. How's the international community responding to that?
They're very reactionary at the moment. No one has striked the Houthis within Yemen, a fragile peace agreement amongst a civil war there. But what we heard from Secretary Blinken as he's making this tour in the Middle East was yesterday, this was the quote he had to say. What I can tell you is that, as we have made clear, many other countries made clear, there'll be consequences for the Houthis' actions. So now we're waiting for those consequences, because right now it is costing companies a lot more money and time to avoid the Red Sea.
We're lucky, though, that damage hasn't been done to US military and to personnel. So let's talk about what might happen if it did happen. What if there is an accident? What's the response going to be?
Well, obviously the Pentagon will have plans of what it means to strike the Houthis within Yemen, and obviously they've been debating whether or not they were going to do that. I think people forget there are hundreds of men and women in U.S. uniforms still in Syria, still in Iraq, still in these places where it's incredibly dangerous for them right now.
I brought that up 2 days ago. Ian Bremmer has a fabulous chart of the Middle East in his Your Age Group's top risks of the year that shows the dispersion of those American troops. I had no idea. It's not like 3 or 4 things, folks. It's 5, 6, 8, 10 geographies around country.
That is why there's been so much criticism about what happened with Lloyd Austin. You go in for an elective surgery, which we now know was for prostate cancer, and at the same time, you allowed your deputy to go on vacation in Puerto Rico. If you are a member of the military and you are overseas in a place like Syria or Iraq, that does not bode well.